Welcome to the Martech Matrix, the podcast where technology meets marketing and the future becomes now. Every week, we dive deep into the world of marketing technology, exploring how digital tools, AI, data analytics, and innovative strategies are reshaping the marketing landscape. Join us as we navigate through this complex matrix, interviewing industry experts, dissecting emerging trends, and decoding strategies that are setting the pace in this digital age. Your host, Sean Simon, has spent the last 30 years leading a variety of MarTech companies from Broadcast.com to Criteo. Now he is the co-founder of the Cogent Collective, a community where marketing and e-commerce leaders come together to discover and vet solutions that address their business needs, bypassing all the noise that comes with technology searches. Learn about the community and see if it's a fit for you at cogentcollective.com. Today, Sean speaks with Yuri Strauss, founder and CEO of WebEyes, a solution that identifies, prioritizes, and resolves e-commerce roadblocks, using AI insights to increase conversions and drive revenue growth, enabling you to run your operations efficiently and effectively. Now, get ready to enter the matrix.
Welcome to episode 7 of the MarTech Matrix. I'm your host, Sean Simon, and I'm pleased to welcome Yuri Strauss into the Matrix. Hello, Yuri.
Hey, Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing well. We're excited to have you here because I've often thought about the impact of the website experience on marketing. I don't know if that's your entire strategy, but marketers spend money or brands spend money and they drive traffic to the website and they leave because they have a bad experience and that hits the marketing budget or the marketing performance. And so this is going to be an interesting conversation for our members, both on the marketing and the e-commerce side. But before we discuss the solutions and the business problems you solve, I have to ask you about the company's founding. First off, what kind of digital agency were you running when you developed the idea for WebEyes?
So first of all, thank you for having me. I had a development agency specifically designed for e-commerce. So we had tens of customers, and we would outsource development to many e-commerce companies. That was the agency itself.
Okay.
Yeah, so easy.
Yeah. So it was more of a web dev agency than a marketing agency, but the problems they overlap. That makes sense. So when you say that you identified a need for robust tools in e-commerce analytics and monitoring, what sort of challenges were you facing that you needed to solve? I mean, there are plenty of analytics tools on the market, right? What couldn't any of them solve that you felt the need to create your own?
So I mean, basically, I had the same pain as the marketing guy. I was the tech side of the conversation, and I would get bashed by all of my customers or some of my customers about something is wrong, something is off, conversion is down, sales are down, customer calling about a specific problem, they can't replicate the problem, and I was the receiving end of those complaints, and I tried out so many pieces of software, so many tools to try to understand like where that friction is happening and what is causing it. And I just couldn't find any solution that could pinpoint a specific problem. So my pain was actually giving good answers to these e-commerce. It would be like VP Commerce. It would be the head of marketing. It would be head of growth. These people that I just didn't have good answers. So it began as an internal tool that we developed internally at my previous company. And I just fell in love with the tool, fell in love with the pain. And what I found out pretty fast is that my pain is the smaller pain, which is giving a good answer, versus their pain, which is actually giving a good user experience and selling online. So the first year was actually shifting the product to be more business focused and understanding where there's lost revenue and how it could be retrieved back.
I was gonna say, I like the business focus piece, right? Because
exactly.
I've been in this business a long time, and anytime there's anything that challenges sort of the marketing execution, it's always like I need to get my dev team or my engineer or somebody technical involved.
Right.
And they're always like, okay, well, we have this report and it says this, this, and this, and they start blaming the JavaScript or the tags, but it's always like 30 days later at best, right? And so it didn't do us any good or them any good, and so they had to make assumptions and then test and see what happens, and then do it all over again the
Right.
next month. So you built a solution that not only identifies the pain point or the friction, I should say, not the pain point, but the friction,
Yeah.
but also developed a way to address it in real time or near real time, so that it's not just a matter of reporting on it.
Correct. So the first thing is that's the point you raised before. So one of the things is we also bridge between the tech and the marketing or the e-commerce or the business side. One of the biggest problems is each division, let's say, has their own tools. So like APM tools, New Relic, App Dynamics, etc., which is great, needed. That's great. And then the marketing guys have their own analytics, which would be Google Analytics, Adobe, etc., which is important. We don't replace either of them. The problem is combining them, because what would happen is they have their systems. They come in and say, "Listen, these are the problems. Our systems are green because they're talking in a different language. It would be tech language versus the business language, and there's nothing that's actually correlating between the two. So WebEyes is actually correlating these two, understanding also the business issues and also the tech issues, and correlating between the two. And the difference, if you already raised that point, so the difference between us and other analytics tools, first of all, we don't compete with them and don't replace them. The thing is that they are looking, if we take the conversion, for example, the easiest, like the conversion funnel, and let's say you have 100 people on the product page and then 20 people add to cart out of those. So you have a 20% conversion rate of adding to cart. It doesn't explain the other 80% that are not adding to cart. So we're actually, the flip side is we're trying to look at what is not working and to explain what happened to these 80%. So that's like kind of the difference between what we do and what analytics does. So we're looking for friction, how much it's costing you in revenue in dollars, and then we fix it. So to answer your question about fixing it, so in the beginning we called it active analytics, and now it's called engage. One of the problems is all the analytic systems are passive. Okay, so at best case you have an insight, and then you have to take action on the insight. In other cases, you have to sift through so much data and try to understand what the insight is. But let's say you already got into an insight, but now you have to take action. So what we saw is that there's in some cases there's just friction between understanding a problem and actually solving a problem, because there's always a list of priorities, and even though it's costing you $100,000, there's still these kinds of features that have to be developed, and there's a long list of priorities, and there's also friction on the prioritization, right? Everyone pulls and shoves and wants to be first in line. So and it just takes a long time to actually fix issues. So what we did is we actually added a component which is active on the page. And what does that mean? So it's a trigger and action rule base. So you set the trigger, for example, if you have a failing coupon or a failing a payment, or you have an out of stock issue, or you forgot, or you just forgot your login credentials, etc. So that would be a trigger, when to trigger the action. And the action would be, for example, if you have an issue with the coupon code, so we can serve. So actually, we serve a pop-up with a coupon code that works. Or for example, if you have a payment issue, we have a few options. One would be, let's open up the chat and explain to the agent exactly what the problem is. So the agent in real time, while the person is still on the payment page, can actually try to solve the problem. The second would be to capture the user information, say, listen, we're so sorry this happened. Please leave your email address. We'll get back to you shortly. It could be a redirect. It could be a coupon, say, listen, we're struggling now. Take a 20% discount, come back next time, it'll work. So there's all kinds of actions that we take. And of course, we also built an A/B test just to make sure that the actual action you're taking increases conversion and not decreases. So yeah, so we're active on the page, and so it's like the 360. So we detect, prioritize, and actually patch it up. We don't really fix the code. We just patch it up with engagements on the page. And we also work with third parties. So it doesn't have to be, we can trigger, for example, Zendesk chat. or we can trigger a list trick, or we can trigger other actions or other third parties that take action on our behalf, but we're the smart trigger that calls them when needed.
Got it. So you're helping brands actually use their current tech stack better because they're probably just sitting there not being used to the fullest extent. When you talk about the friction points, you mentioned technical and business, and I think the ones you described, they sound more business. Is that fair? Like coupons and logins and
Right.
payments. What are
Exactly.
some technical challenges you might address or identify and address that the audience would understand?
Sure. We detect two kinds of friction points. Like you said, one would be the business, and then the second would be tech. The business side is all of the goals or the events that you're familiar with. If it's login, registration, add to cart, remove from cart, add to wish list, payments, updating the billing information, that's all events that you want, or goals that you want users to go down the journey until they purchase. And on the tech side, we're capturing all the Google core metrics, core vitals, load time, time to interactive, first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, the cumulative layout shift, JavaScript errors, Ajax call failures, third-party call failures. So basically, it's everything that is impacting the user experience. In some cases, it's actually visible in the UI itself. In some cases, it's not visible. We also have full session recordings, so you can actually, once you see a failure, you can actually visualize it with a session recording. Because in many cases, you have like a payment, it just says payment failure. How did you reach that point? What exactly happened? How can you replicate it? So visually, we also have like a session recording which you can play back and see exactly the failures. But I think the most important part here, there's many, for example, tech monitoring tools that will list all the failures, and you have failures. The biggest problem is to understand, is it impacting conversion rate? If it is, how much is it impacting? And that really helps prioritization. So we can actually put a price tag on an issue. So for example, this JavaScript error is happening on the payment page. It's causing a drop of 35% in conversion rate, and the lost revenue is $20,000 in the past week. So it gives you a priority. Yeah, so it really helps you prioritize what is the failure. Is it the most important failure I should handle? So it helps you, push it down the funnel, or the tasks, the pipeline of the development. So it really helps you, because in many cases there's something that happens on the landing page, and it happens a million times, but it's actually not impacting conversion rate. And usually what happens is you take the one that's happening the most and fix it. But the most important is the one that's actually affecting conversion rate.
Yeah. I want to go back. You said something earlier around you focus on the 80% of the traffic that's experiencing friction, not just the abandoned cart. It sounds like you also do the abandoned cart. I think that there's probably a lot of solutions out there that just focus on the abandoned cart and how great they are at increasing conversions. I mean, these people are at the very bottom of the funnel, so I doubt that they have the influence over those users at that point. But the 80% presents a huge opportunity, and I have to imagine some brands just say, well, maybe they just didn't find what they were looking for, right?
Right.
But it sounds like it's way more than that. Do you have an estimate of? I mean, this is a really broad question, but how much revenue, or even on a percentage basis, your customers are recapturing or saving from friction when you're implemented?
So it really depends on the company, but we see between like 10% to 40% increase in conversion rate.
Wow.
That would be a ballpark. There are companies that have much more, but that's like more the outliers. So they have like crazy. We actually have one use case of one case study on the website of $3 million in like 2 months, and for a furniture store. They had a huge issue. That's a different story, but so it really depends on the the technology, how aware they are, how the company is actually looking at user experience, and if they're monitoring it, and if they actually already iterated, because it's basically it's endless. The work is endless, and you always have to optimize. Optimization is endless. So it really depends, but we see between 10 and 40% of an increase, and it's gradual. I mean, there's all kinds of fixes, and in some cases, the two, let's say usually we see like the beginning, the biggest impact is of course in the beginning because you were blind and now you can suddenly see. You fix many things. And after that, suddenly 2 months later, there's a new version that, and then you have like, or a third party breaks in the middle and causes whatever, or suddenly there's latency and we alert about it and then they fix it. So I think the ballpark would be between 10 and 40% of increase in conversion rate. Not 100% of the issues are fixable. In some cases, it's third parties, but everything is you can work around many issues. So the simplest example is, for example, people on average, I think the number is 35% of the logins fail because people
Wow.
forget their password. And usually a brand will say, okay, they don't remember the password. What can I do? So what you can do is actually a few things. One would be have a social login, right? So you probably won't forget your Facebook email password or the or Google, your account on Google. You won't forget that. The second one would be have a one-time password sent to your phone or have a magic link sent to your email. So there's all kinds of ways around things that look as if, what can I do? There's many, many workarounds that we already saw working.
It's funny you say that. I forget which platform I was logging into yesterday, and it didn't even ask me for a password. It just said, put in your email address, and they sent me the code, and I just typed the code in. Like they're just like, forget the password. People don't
Yep.
remember them. We're just gonna give them a code and send it to their phone or their email address. So that's brilliant. And you mentioned earlier something about recording. You kind of glossed over that. So you record. I know there's other companies. We just came back from e-tail, and there's a handful of companies out there that do the recording, right? And they make it sound very, very interesting, right? You get to see the mistakes or the challenges that users are experiencing on your website so that you can go tell the right person to go fix it. But you do that in addition to fixing the problem, if you can.
Right. Yeah, so there's a few session recording tools out there. The biggest problem with session recording is to find the right recording. At WebEyes, that's the end of the analysis, and you don't really have to watch the recording. In some cases, the error message is clear enough, and you don't have to view the session recording. But in some cases, you do want to visualize it. With a session recording tool, one of the biggest problems is, first of all, it's usually sampled, so you don't have 100% of the sessions. The second is you have to start playing back hundreds of videos, and then in your head, you have to try to correlate between what did I just see and okay, I saw that once. Did it happen another 100 times, or is this the only case that it happened? So all the data is in the session recording. What we do, we extract the data, and the analytics is done on the data. And at the end, you can also play back the session recording. But analyzing the data, for example, all the failures, all the goal failures, all the login failures, payment, everything is already extracted from the actual session recording. So all the analytics, the monitoring, the lost revenue, the conversion, etc., is already done on the data. And that's why you only have to watch 1, 2, maybe 3 videos to just visualize what that error looks like. So session recording is a commodity, but the problem is actually insights out of session. We hear it and it's so time consuming. I mean, you can spend hours on watching, and you can waste hours of time because you don't always find an issue. And it just depends on how much memory you have in your brain to actually connect all the dots.
Yeah, I mean, time is money, right? Really, in this case, if you're taking too much time going through video after video to fix a problem, rather than just fix it in real time, you've already lost the revenue. So, it's difficult to go back and get that. And the other thing you didn't talk about really is like saving some of the conversions. That's just that first conversion, right? If you can convert the user and there's a lifetime value to that consumer coming back, depending on your business, you can't account for that if the user just bails. You have no idea what the opportunity loss would have been.
Right. So actually, we saw some very interesting statistics. So something that I read about was that if a user encounters a bad experience, they only have a 10%, forgot the word, 10% of the probability of 10% of coming back to the same website.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so 90% of the time you're going to lose that user after a bad experience. And there's a lot of psychology behind it because let's take the simplest one, load time. Okay, load time. if the site loads slowly, what happens and people don't want to wait, okay? But what happens in the back of their mind is, okay, their site isn't working well. Probably the service is not going to be good. The shipping probably is going to be off. If I want to return, no one's. So in your head, it's like, okay, if they don't know how to load the page, what is the service going to look like? So that's one interesting stat. The second is, I mean, the cost of acquisition is so high.
Yeah.
Okay, so a cost of acquisition of a customer is super high. And customers that do have intent and are still leaving because of all kinds of glitches, of suddenly you get an empty cart, you added 3 items to the cart and then you hit the cart, and we see this so many times, and the cart is empty suddenly. Or you actually try to pay and then redirects to an empty cart because there was a payment failure, and there's so many glitches that happen on the web. These are people that are lost. And what I heard, the stat that I heard was interesting. If you're breaking even on the first purchase, that's good. Usually you lose on the first purchase on the customer, and then the lifetime value is what makes the business. So if you're not giving a good service to your customer, you're going to lose them on the first purchase, and of course on the second purchase, and exactly what you said. I mean, you're usually losing on the first purchase, so you have to have lifetime value. If you don't, and the only way to have lifetime value, of course, it's a good product and the shipping, etc. But it's also the actual user experience that they have while they're surfing on the website.
I like that you brought up cost of acquisition, because this is something that we talk about all the time with our members over at the Coaching Collective. They're trying to figure out, how am I going to manage CAC when Facebook's raising their rates and Google searches are going up, right? And the sort of the universe of where they can reach their target audience is getting smaller and smaller because cookies are going away. And
Right.
now they're spending more money to get the same amount or fewer users to the website. They better convert them at a higher rate.
Right.
So that they can keep their CAC down.
Right.
Otherwise, they have to figure out how they're going to become more efficient with their media dollars, or they're going to have to raise their prices, right?
Right.
This is not a single brand problem. This is an industry-wide problem. And so we're helping them with that. But this is just another tool in the toolbox that can certainly help them, rather than just focusing on how do you find media that works. Let's find ways to convert the users once we get them there. It seems like a big problem. So with that, we've talked about marketing and ROAS. We've talked about e-commerce. We talked about technical solutions. Who do you typically sell into, or who's involved into that conversation at the brand when somebody brings up WebEyes?
So we have 4 kinds of people we work with. It would be, we would work with the e-commerce team. It would be VP Commerce. It would be, I mean, there's all kinds of names. It can be VP Growth. It could be that side of the business, of actually people that care about conversion and sales. In that, there's also the mix of, if it's a larger company, it would be the head of conversion rate optimization. So it really depends on the size of the company. The second would be, of course, the tech team, because they're the flip side of that. That's the discussion between the business and tech, and they have access to the platform. They actually fix things. They don't have to be told to fix things as they're getting proactive. The third would be the product team. So it's actually visualizing how users are interacting with the product and to see if it's as designed. And the fourth would be customer support, because one of the biggest problems today with customer support is, okay, you get a call, you get a ticket, you get an email. Of course, there's 0% you're going to actually replicate the problem. And then there's this back and forth of, was it mobile? Was it Chrome? What landing page? What did they add to cart? Can we maybe zoom with them and we can visualize it? And of course you can't. And so what happens with WebEyes is you have a user ID, you have a session ID, you have a customer ID, you have an order ID. There's many ways. We don't collect PII, so we don't search per email, but you have all these metrics where you can find the actual customer. We have a segmentation engine. Once you segment by a specific one of these metrics, you can just visualize exactly what happened to the customer, and you have all the steps to reproduce the problem, so you can understand exactly what happened. Your support becomes much better. So those are 4 people that we speak with.
Interesting. So earlier you mentioned the case study on the website. Can you, whether you use that one or a different one, doesn't matter, but can you take us through a case study from the problem that the brand came to you with, or maybe you went to them and you identified a problem, but what was the problem? And then how did you go about navigating the internal organization and get the technology integrated and talk us through all the way, like what was the outcome that you provided so that the listeners can understand in their own business how it might apply?
Sure. Yeah, so we have many case studies on the website. What's interesting here, it's very, most of the case study or most of the use cases or the success stories are very unique. So there's so many factors that can happen, that can change the result. You're using a platform, you're using on average like 25 or 30 different third parties. Your users are surfing from different internet connections. The devices are very different. There's so many mobile devices, so many browsers. So the metrics of testing everything is just impossible. So there's all kinds of use cases that happen. And sometimes it's your code that's breaking. Sometimes it's third-party code that's breaking. Sometimes it's just a bug that's in the system. I have one interesting one that was causing a lot of lost revenue because it was affecting the adding to cart. Okay, so what we saw is a drop in the number of products in cart. That's the first thing we detected. And the second thing we detected is the add to cart latency. So we also measure how much time from the add to cart until it was actually added to cart. So we saw that increased. So we started investigating, and what we saw is that as you add more items to the cart, the load time of the cart is much slower. Okay, and each addition to the cart can take up to 30 or 40, 50 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that was detected pretty quickly, and that was, by the way, not a new customer. It was an existing customer, and it just happened after a few months. And when we approach them with that, because we got two kinds of alerts. One is the increase in the latency, and the second is the drop in the number of items in cart. And when we correlated the two, what we understood, and we approached them with these two issues, and we spoke this time with the tech team. And what they understood was that the bug was they have the discount engine run on each addition to cart. So if I added a second item, it runs and makes sure that they want to see what kind of a discount is for this combination of things. The bug was that they added that they were running on all of the discounts historically in the database, not only the ones that are active. And usually active, there's like 2 or 3, but they had like thousands of discounts in the database. So the more you add, the more combinations there are, and then the more rules that it runs in the database, like 1,000 different disabled discounts, and that caused that latency. So once it was detected, it was the CTO who investigated it. The quick was pretty fixed. They understood where the bug was. It was with one of the releases, and we also have this way to on the CI/CD, on the continuous deployment integration. You can also send us an event saying there was a version. So we also have a marker saying there was a version uploaded here, and then we saw the spike. So we know it's correlated to that version. And then they found that bug, and it was rolled back really quickly. So that was the whole cycle. Basically, it was an internal cycle. In the more complex cases, it also involves the business. So it could be coupon codes, extending coupon codes that are, you have a campaign running with a coupon code, but you forgot to enable a coupon code. Broken links, of course, of 4 pages. There's products that are out of stock and pointing to a dead page, and it has to be redirected. So, and of course, payment issues like huge. So, and in many cases, it's also a conversation between the business and the tech. So there's a payment issue. First of all, let's fix it with Engage, and then let's talk to the CTO or whoever it is on the tech side or the agency that's handling it and actually fix the problem.
It feels like it feels like a no-brainer solution. Like why you wouldn't want something in there monitoring all of this, especially if things can pop up over time that you can't explain. They just happen. It also seems like the way you describe that scenario, that maybe the head of e-commerce was the quarterback, and then you had technical and marketing sort of all aligned based on their specific needs, but they drove it. I find that fascinating. I was surprised you mentioned earlier A/B testing? Because this just seems like inherent, right? Like you just know as an e-commerce manager that things don't always go well, right? It's technical issues, business issues, whatever it might be, but you still come in and you prove your value through A/B testing. Can you elaborate on how that works?
Sure. So the A/B testing is supported for our Engage module. The Engage is the trigger and action rule base, which actually takes action on any issue that we detect. So we just want to make sure that the actual action is converting more, that the fix itself is actually helping conversion and not dropping for some reason the conversion rate. So we do it on, for example, coupon codes. So let's say 50/50, and we trigger the event. Let's say there's a specific failure on the coupon code. We just want to make sure that the variant that we created is actually converting more. So we have baked into the system is we have an A/B test for each engage. You can turn it on or off, and then you can choose how the percentage you want to run it on. And it runs, if we take the 50/50, it'll run on a specific trigger. For example, coupon code failure contains error 123, and it happened twice in a session. So that would be a trigger. So we would run a 50/50 test on that trigger, and the action would be always the same. Or nothing, or specific. For example, let's pop up a coupon code, and then in a reporting system, you'll see, okay, this specific engage increased conversion rate by 30%. Okay, great. Let's move it to 90% because you always prefer to have a control group. And that's one engage in place, done. And then we have the same for exit intent, redirecting for 4 pages, the payment pop-ups, etc., etc.
It sounds really complex. So, and I'm assuming that you've worked through the challenges there of getting all of that set up. Take us through how what's involved in a setup, and how do you support the brands, given that there's so many stakeholders
Sure.
in that setup, to ensure that when you launch the tools, they actually work.
Sure. So we understood that no one likes to touch settings, and we know that, for example, you buy Microsoft Excel or whatever, or Google Sheets, and you maybe work with 5% of the functionality. So what we did is, in terms of implementation, you need to put a script on the page. That is it. There's no development, there's no tagging, there's no work with Google Tag Manager. You just put the script on the page. There's no events that you have to put in place. We know how to read all the data. We're not reliant on it doesn't matter the structure of the page or any software you're using. You just put the script on the page and we begin collecting the information. That's step one. Step two is, after that is done, we have an onboarding process. The onboarding is, first of all, just to make sure that we detected all the goals and everything's okay. If not, you just point us in the right direction, what goals we missed, and then that's done manually with our onboarding team. And we have 2 other calls, which is basically onboarding, teaching you about the platform and how to use the system and how to get insights out of it and how to set up the alerts and user management and permissions, etc. Once that's done, usually that takes like 2 weeks, and then we have enough data to actually have an insights call. So we have monthly insights call with each customer, because we want to make sure you're utilizing everything, you understand the data, you're prioritizing correctly. If you give us access to your Monday, Asana, Jira, whatever it is, we actually help you manage our tickets. So we'll usually open between 3 and 5 tickets at the beginning, just to, these are the top 3. I don't want to overwhelm you, and make sure that it's actually being handled. And we go month over month and we clean up stuff. That's one thing. And the second thing would be, we set up the engages for you. So it's all UI based, so there's no like database magic happening behind the scenes, but we just want to make sure that you're setting up the engagements. For example, out of the box, we set up the exit intent, a survey at the end at the thank you page, and there's a few questions we already ask, and the 4 redirect. That's like the go-to. That's a given. That's easy. Everyone wants them. And then based on the data, we create more and more engagements, but everything is approved by the customer. And then we run it live. So it's a seamless process. There's no heavy lifting from the customer side, from the brand side, and we have the monthly call. to make sure that the data is consumed correctly, that you understand the data, that you're taking action. Because if you're not going to take action, that's not going to be a happy customer in a few months. So we want to make sure that everyone's taking action, that you see an increasing. Our only goal is to see increasing conversion rate. That's the goal.
Got it. Okay, so my biggest takeaway to this point is 10 to 40% savings, or from lost revenue, right? So,
right.
If you're a $1 billion company, that's the minimum $100 million. You could be losing right now without having a solution like WebEyes in place. So it's a big consideration. You're doing all these other things. You're not even accounting for the waste that they're spending on other tools that might, not saving the revenue. And just increasing your media spend is going to increase all your CAC and stuff. So if nothing else, remember that 10% number, and obviously it could be more, that you could be generating if you had a tool like WebEyes in place. This has been fascinating. Thanks for being here. This is going to do it for episode 7. Yuri, again, thank you for being here and sharing with our audience how they can do a better job in their e-commerce experience and drive more revenue. So until next time, don't get lost in the matrix.
Thank you very much.
This episode of the MarTech Matrix was brought to you by the Cogent Collective, a community of marketing and e-commerce leaders. Learn more and inquire about membership at cogentcollective.com. For show notes and information on upcoming episodes, head on over to the martechmatrix.com, where you can submit questions for upcoming guests. Once again, thank you, Yuri, for joining us today and explaining to our listeners that not only can they identify friction points in their e-commerce experience, they can also address it in real time, saving their company millions of dollars each year. If you would like to learn more about WebEyes and see if they are a good fit for your company, send Sean a note at sean@cogentcollective.com. New episodes of the MarTech Matrix podcast will drop every Monday, so be sure to subscribe with your favorite podcast network so you can stay on top of what's happening in the Matrix. Next week, the MarTech Matrix and the Cogent Collective will be on location at ShopTalk in Las Vegas. If you will also be there, drop Sean a note at sean@cogentcollective.com so we can meet up and discuss the MarTech Matrix. Entering the Matrix next week will be Pete Jimison, founder and CEO of Frequency. We will discuss how audio advertisers can personalize, optimize, and manage campaigns at scale from one location. Until then, don't get lost in the MarTech Matrix.